23-year-old Lisa Martinez never imagined that the person she trusted most in the world would become the one to steal her lifeline. What started as a loving family arrangement would spiral into a betrayal so deep that it would take a federal judge to set things right. This is the true story of how one young woman's fight for justice exposed the shocking truth about financial abuse within families and how she refused to stay silent when everyone told her to just let it go. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
Lisa Martinez had always been different, though she'd spent most of her childhood not understanding exactly how. Growing up in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, she was the youngest of 3 children in what appeared to be a typical middle-class American family. Her father, Robert Martinez, worked as a mechanic at a local auto shop, while her mother, Patricia, managed the household and worked part-time at a nearby elementary school. Her older siblings, her brother Jake, who was 28, and her sister Emma, 26, had both moved on with their adult lives, leaving Lisa as the only one still living in the family's modest ranch-style home on Maple Street. The Martinez family had always prided themselves on sticking together through thick and thin. Robert often reminded his children that family comes first, always. A philosophy that had been passed down from his own father, who had immigrated from Mexico in the 1960s with nothing but determination and hope for a better life. Patricia, whose Irish-American family had been in Arizona for generations, shared this devotion to family unity. Together, they had created a household where loyalty was paramount and blood was thicker than water. Lisa's challenges had manifested early in life, though it took years to get proper answers. As a toddler, she struggled with coordination and balance in ways that seemed far beyond typical childhood clumsiness. Simple tasks like buttoning her shirt or tying her shoes remained difficult well into elementary school. Her parents initially attributed these challenges to her being a late bloomer, but as Lisa grew older, it became clear that something more significant was at play. The migraines started when Lisa was 7. At first, they were occasional, maybe once every few weeks, but they gradually became more frequent and severe. Along with the headaches came an unusual fatigue that would leave her exhausted after activities that other children her age could handle with ease. Her teachers noticed that Lisa, despite being clearly intelligent and engaged, would sometimes struggle to maintain focus during longer lessons or would need to rest during recess while other kids played. School became increasingly challenging as Lisa moved into middle school. The academic work wasn't the problem. She had always been a bright student with a particular talent for writing and literature. The issue was her body's inability to keep up with the demands of a full school day. Some mornings she would wake up feeling as though she hadn't slept at all, despite getting a full night's rest. Other days, the migraines would be so intense that she could barely open her eyes, let alone concentrate on math problems or history lessons. Patricia spent countless hours advocating for her daughter, scheduling appointments with pediatricians, neurologists, and specialists of every kind. The family's modest insurance plan meant that many of these visits came with significant out-of-pocket costs, creating financial strain that Robert and Patricia tried to hide from their children. They were determined to find answers, regardless of the expense. The breakthrough came during Lisa's junior year in high school when she was finally diagnosed with a rare neurological condition that affected her coordination, energy levels, and cognitive processing under stress. The condition was chronic and would likely worsen over time, but with proper management, including medication, physical therapy, and lifestyle adjustments, Lisa could maintain a reasonable quality of life. However, the diagnosis also meant accepting some difficult realities. Lisa's dreams of attending college far from home became impractical. The rigorous schedule and independence required for traditional university life would be too overwhelming given her condition. Instead, she enrolled in community college classes that she could take part-time, allowing her to pursue her education at a pace that accommodated her health needs. By age 21, Lisa's condition had progressed to the point where even part-time work became difficult to maintain. She had tried various jobs, working at a local bookstore, doing administrative work for a small nonprofit, even attempting to freelance as a writer, but the unpredictable nature of her symptoms made consistent employment nearly impossible. Some weeks she felt well enough to work full-time. Others she could barely manage a few hours without triggering severe migraines or exhaustion that would leave her bedridden for days.
It was during this period that Patricia suggested Lisa apply for Social Security disability insurance. The idea initially felt like admitting defeat to Lisa, who had always prided herself on her independence despite her challenges. She worried about the stigma and what people would think. But as medical bills continued to mount and her ability to contribute financially to the household diminished, it became clear that SSDI might be her only viable option for maintaining some measure of financial stability. The application process was exhausting and demoralizing. Lisa had to compile years of medical records, submit to additional evaluations, and endure interviews where she felt forced to emphasize her limitations rather than her capabilities. She had to detail every way her condition affected her daily life, how some mornings she couldn't lift her head from the pillow due to the pain, how bright lights could trigger debilitating episodes, how cognitive fog would sometimes make simple tasks like balancing a checkbook feel impossibly complex. After nearly 18 months of waiting, appeals, and additional documentation, Lisa finally received approval for SSDI benefits. The monthly payment wasn't large, just over $800, but it represented something crucial: recognition that her condition was real, that her struggles were valid, and that she deserved support to maintain her dignity and independence. When the first check arrived, Lisa felt a complex mix of emotions. There was relief, certainly, knowing that she would have some financial security even when her health prevented her from working. But there was also a deep sadness about the path her life had taken. At 23, while her former classmates were graduating from four-year universities, starting careers, and moving into their own apartments, Lisa was dependent on disability benefits and still living with her parents. Jake, her older brother, had always been protective of Lisa in a way that sometimes bordered on overbearing. After dropping out of college during his sophomore year, he had worked a series of jobs: construction, retail, food service, but never seemed to find his footing professionally. He lived in a small apartment across town with his girlfriend Sarah, and their relationship was often turbulent. Money was frequently tight for Jake, and he had developed a pattern of borrowing from family members when bills came due. When Lisa's disability benefits began arriving, Jake initially seemed supportive. He praised her perseverance through the application process and assured her that there was no shame in accepting help when it was needed. But Lisa began to notice subtle changes in his behavior. He would make offhand comments about how lucky she was to have money coming in without having to work for it. He would joke about wishing he could get free money like Lisa did. The family dynamics around Lisa's disability were complex. Robert and Patricia wanted to be supportive while also encouraging Lisa to remain as independent as possible. They charged her a modest amount for room and board, much less than she would pay for her own apartment, but enough to help her maintain some sense of contributing to the household. They also helped her set up a separate bank account specifically for her disability payments, wanting her to learn to manage her finances independently. Emma, Lisa's sister, had married young and moved to Colorado with her husband. She stayed in touch with the family, but was largely absent from the day-to-day dynamics surrounding Lisa's situation. This left Jake as the primary sibling figure in Lisa's immediate life, a role he seemed to take seriously, perhaps too seriously. Lisa's world had become smaller, but more manageable. She had established routines that worked with her condition. She would wake up each morning and assess how she felt, adjusting her plans accordingly. On good days, she might attend her community college classes, meet with friends for coffee, or work on her writing projects. On difficult days, she would rest, focus on gentle activities like reading or sketching, and take care of her basic needs without pushing herself beyond her limits. The disability payments allowed Lisa to contribute to the household expenses while also maintaining some personal spending money and building modest savings. For the first time since her diagnosis, she felt like she had some control over her financial future. She could plan small purchases, set aside money for medical expenses not covered by insurance, and even occasionally treat herself to something special: a new book, a nice meal out with friends, or supplies for her art projects. This sense of stability and independence was precious to Lisa. Having grown up watching her parents struggle financially, especially during the years when her medical expenses were mounting, she understood the value of financial security. She was careful with her money, budgeting meticulously and avoiding unnecessary expenses. The disability payments weren't much, but they were reliable, and they were hers.
As autumn arrived in Phoenix, Lisa felt cautiously optimistic about her future. She was making progress in her community college courses, her health seemed relatively stable, and she had begun exploring the possibility of eventually pursuing a bachelor's degree through an online program that would accommodate her needs. She had even started dating someone, a fellow student named Marcus, who understood her limitations and supported her goals. For the first time in years, Lisa felt like she was building a life that worked for her, disabilities and all. She couldn't have imagined that this hard-won sense of security was about to be shattered by the person she trusted most in the world.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in November when Lisa tried to use her debit card at the campus bookstore. She had been looking forward to purchasing a new textbook for her creative writing class, something she had budgeted for carefully the week before. When the card was declined, Lisa felt a familiar flutter of anxiety in her chest. Technology glitches happen, she told herself. She tried the card again. "I'm sorry, but it's still not going through," the cashier said apologetically. "Do you have another form of payment?" Lisa's cheeks burned with embarrassment as other students lined up behind her. She mumbled an excuse about checking with her bank and left the bookstore empty-handed, her heart racing in a way that often preceded one of her migraines. The walk across campus felt longer than usual, and by the time she reached her car, the familiar throbbing behind her eyes had begun. At home, Lisa immediately called the customer service number on the back of her debit card. After navigating through multiple automated menus and waiting on hold for 20 minutes, she finally reached a representative. "I'm showing that your account balance is currently at $12.37, the representative informed her in a professionally neutral tone. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. "That's impossible. I should have over $600 in that account. My disability payment was deposited last week." "I see here that there was indeed a deposit of $843 on November 3rd. However, I'm also showing several larger withdrawals over the past few days." As the representative read off the transactions, Lisa felt the room begin to spin. 3 withdrawals of $200 each from ATMs across Phoenix, 2 more withdrawals of $150, all made with her debit card, all using her PIN number. "Ma'am, are you still there?" the representative asked after Lisa had been silent for several moments. "Yes, I need to report fraud. Those withdrawals weren't made by me." "I understand this must be concerning. I'll transfer you to our fraud department right away." The fraud department was thorough, but discouraging. Yes, they could investigate the unauthorized withdrawals, but the process would take 7 to 10 business days. In the meantime, Lisa's account would remain frozen. They would issue her a new debit card, but it would take another 5 to 7 business days to arrive. Most troubling of all, the representative explained that since the withdrawals had been made using Lisa's actual debit card and PIN number, the investigation would need to determine whether the card had truly been stolen or if someone Lisa knew had accessed it. After hanging up the phone, Lisa sat in her childhood bedroom, staring at the financial statements scattered across her desk. The numbers didn't lie. Someone had systematically emptied her account, leaving her with barely enough money for a fast food meal. But who could have done this? She kept her debit card in her purse, which rarely left her side. She had never written down her PIN number, choosing instead to use her father's birthday, a date that was meaningful to her but not obvious to others. Or so she had thought. Lisa's mind raced through the possibilities. She lived with her parents, but the idea that either Robert or Patricia would steal from her was unthinkable. They had been nothing but supportive throughout her journey with disability benefits, often going out of their way to help her manage her finances responsibly. Emma lived in Colorado and hadn't even visited in months. That left, the realization hit Lisa like a physical blow. Jake knew their father's birthday. Of course. And Jake had been at the house frequently over the past few weeks.
He had been going through another rough patch with Sarah, often stopping by to vent his frustrations to Patricia or to ask if he could stay for dinner. Lisa remembered him being in the living room while she had gone to get her purse to pay Patricia back for groceries, just last week. He could have easily seen her enter her PIN when she checked her balance. But even as the logical part of her mind connected the dots, Lisa's heart rebelled against the conclusion. Jake was her brother. He had been protective of her since childhood, always standing up for her when other kids made fun of her differences. When she was first diagnosed, he had been one of her strongest advocates, researching her condition online and even accompanying her to doctor's appointments when their parents couldn't. The idea that he would steal from her, especially money that she depended on for her basic needs, seemed impossible. Lisa decided to call Jake directly. Maybe there was an explanation she hadn't considered. Maybe someone had stolen both their information, or there had been some kind of banking error that affected multiple accounts. She dialed his number with shaking hands. "Hey, Lisa, what's up?" Jake answered after several rings. His voice sounded normal, casual, with no hint of guilt or concern. "Lisa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Lisa took a deep breath. "Someone used my debit card to take almost all the money out of my account. The withdrawals were made with my actual card and PIN. I'm trying to figure out what happened." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Jake spoke again, his tone had shifted slightly. "That's weird. Are you sure it wasn't you? Sometimes when my migraines are bad, I forget stuff I've done." The suggestion stung. Lisa had been dealing with comments about her memory and cognitive functions since her diagnosis, but they usually came from strangers or medical professionals, not from family members who were supposed to understand her condition. "Jake, I'm not having memory problems. Someone took my money. Do you know anything about this?" Another pause, longer this time. "Lisa, I don't know why you're calling me about this. Maybe you should talk to Mom and Dad if you're having money problems." The deflection felt wrong, but Lisa pressed on. "I'm not having money problems. Someone stole from me. Jake, please, if you know anything..." "Look, Lisa, I've got to go. Sarah and I are trying to work some things out, and I can't deal with this drama right now. Call the bank if you think someone stole your money." He hung up before Lisa could respond, leaving her staring at her phone in disbelief. In all their years as siblings, Jake had never dismissed her concerns so abruptly. Even during his most self-absorbed phases, he had at least pretended to listen when she needed help. Over the next few days, Lisa found herself watching Jake more carefully during his visits to the house. He seemed different. More agitated than usual, quicker to snap at minor frustrations, and oddly eager to change the subject whenever the conversation turned to money or Lisa's situation. When Patricia mentioned that Lisa was having trouble with her bank account, Jake's response was a casual shrug and a comment about how banks make mistakes all the time. Meanwhile, Lisa was forced to confront the practical reality of having virtually no money. She couldn't afford her medications without dipping into the tiny emergency fund she'd been building. She had to cancel a doctor's appointment because she couldn't afford the copay. Most humiliatingly, she had to ask her parents for money to buy basic necessities like shampoo and laundry detergent, items that she had been proudly purchasing for herself since her disability benefits began.
Robert and Patricia were concerned and supportive, offering to help however they could, but Lisa could see the worry in their eyes. They were already stretched financially, and taking on additional expenses for Lisa meant sacrifices elsewhere. Robert started working overtime shifts at the auto shop, coming home exhausted and covered in grease. Patricia began skipping her weekly coffee dates with friends, claiming she was too busy, but Lisa suspected it was really about saving money. The guilt was overwhelming.
Lisa had finally reached a point where she felt like she was contributing to the household rather than being a burden, and now she was back to depending on her parents' generosity. The sense of independence she had worked so hard to build was crumbling, and she felt powerless to stop it. A week after the initial theft, Lisa noticed something that made her stomach drop. Jake arrived at the house wearing a new leather jacket, expensive looking, with tags from a high-end department store downtown. When Patricia complimented him on it, he casually mentioned that he had gotten a small bonus at work and decided to treat himself. "That's wonderful, mijo," Patricia said, genuinely pleased. "You work so hard. You deserve something nice." Lisa wanted to believe in coincidences, but the timing felt too suspicious. Jake worked at a warehouse loading trucks, not typically a job that came with bonuses, especially not bonuses large enough to afford designer leather jackets. She found herself doing quick mental math. The jacket probably costs at least $300, roughly the same amount as one of the larger withdrawals from her account. That evening, after Jake had left and their parents were watching television in the living room, Lisa sat in her bedroom trying to process what she was beginning to understand. Her own brother, the person who had once carried her home when she fell off her bike, who had taught her to drive when she was finally old enough to, who had promised to always protect her, had stolen money that she desperately needed to survive. But knowing and proving were two different things. The bank's fraud investigation was ongoing, but even if they determined that the withdrawals were unauthorized, that wouldn't necessarily identify who had made them. Jake was family. He knew details about Lisa's life that a stranger wouldn't. He had access to the house and opportunities to observe her PIN usage. Most importantly, he knew that Lisa's disability benefits were reliable income, money that would be replaced each month, making the theft seem less severe in his mind. Lisa realized that she was facing a choice that would define not just her financial future, but her relationship with her family forever. She could stay quiet, absorb the loss, and hope it never happened again, or she could confront Jake directly and risk tearing their family apart with accusations that might be impossible to prove. As she lay in bed that night, listening to the familiar sounds of her childhood home, Lisa understood that her life was about to change in ways she had never anticipated. The stability and security she had worked so hard to build were slipping away, and the person responsible was someone she had trusted completely. Tomorrow, she would have to decide what to do about it.
Lisa spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with what she knew in her heart to be true before she finally worked up the courage to confront Jake directly. The confrontation came on a Friday evening when he stopped by the house to borrow their father's truck for the weekend. Lisa had been waiting by the living room window, watching for his arrival, her palms sweaty and her heart hammering against her ribs in a way that threatened to trigger one of her episodes. "Jake, can we talk privately for a minute?" she asked as he headed toward the kitchen where their parents were preparing dinner. He paused, glancing toward the sound of Patricia's laughter echoing from the other room. "Can it wait? I promised Sarah I'd pick her up by 7, and I still need to get Dad's keys." "It's about my bank account, about the money that was stolen." Lisa kept her voice low but firm. "I know it was you." Jake's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. The casual, slightly annoyed expression he had been wearing disappeared, replaced by something Lisa had never seen on her brother's face before, a cold, calculating look that made her stomach lurch. "That's a pretty serious accusation, Lisa." His voice was quiet, almost dangerous. "You better be really sure before you start throwing around words like stolen." "I am sure." Lisa's voice shook, but she pressed on. "The withdrawals were made with my actual card and PIN. You're the only person besides me who knows Dad's birthday, and you've been here when I've used my card. The timing matches up with your new jacket, and stop." Jake stepped closer, and Lisa instinctively backed toward the wall.
You need to think very carefully about what you're saying right now. You're accusing your own brother of stealing from you. Do you have any idea what that would do to this family?" The question hit Lisa like a slap. She had been so focused on the injustice of the theft itself that she hadn't fully considered the broader implications of exposing it. Their parents had worked so hard to maintain family unity throughout all the challenges with her health. Robert still talked about the importance of family loyalty, especially during difficult times. Patricia had sacrificed so much to keep the family together, mediating conflicts and ensuring that everyone felt supported and loved. "Jake, I just want my money back," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's all. We don't have to involve Mom and Dad if you just—" "Your money?" Jake's laugh was bitter and harsh. "Lisa, think about this logically for a second. You sit at home all day, doing basically nothing, and the government sends you a check every month. Meanwhile, I'm breaking my back at the warehouse, working 10-hour shifts in a job that's literally destroying my body, and I can barely afford to keep my apartment." Lisa felt as though she had been punched in the gut. "Jake, that's not fair. I didn't choose to have this condition. Those disability payments aren't free money. They're compensation for the fact that I can't work full-time like other people." "Can't work or won't work. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've got a pretty sweet setup. You live here rent-free, Mom does your laundry and cooks your meals, and you get to play a college student part-time while collecting a government check. Some of us don't have that luxury." Each word felt like a physical blow. Lisa had heard these sentiments before, from strangers, from people who didn't understand invisible disabilities, from politicians on television who ranted about welfare fraud. But hearing them from her own brother, someone who had witnessed her struggles firsthand, was devastating in a way she hadn't expected. "That's not how it works," Lisa said, tears now streaming down her face. "You know what I go through every day. You know how hard it was for me to get approved for benefits. You've seen me when I'm having bad episodes, when I can barely function. How can you say those things?"
Jake's expression softened slightly, but only for a moment. "Look, Lisa, I'm not saying your health problems aren't real, but you have to understand my position here. Sarah and I are struggling. We're behind on rent, our car payment is overdue, and I haven't been able to afford to take her anywhere nice in months. She's starting to talk about whether we have a future together." The revelation explained a lot about Jake's recent behavior. His increased agitation, his more frequent visits home, his desperate need for money. But it didn't excuse what he had done, and Lisa couldn't understand how he had convinced himself that stealing from his disabled sister was an acceptable solution to his problems. "So you decided to steal from me?" Lisa asked. "Jake, that money isn't extra income for me. It's what I need to survive. It pays for my medications, my medical appointments, my basic living expenses. When you took it, you didn't just take money, you took my ability to take care of myself." "I didn't steal anything," Jake said, his voice hardening again. "I borrowed it. And honestly, Lisa, you don't really need it the way I do. You have Mom and Dad to fall back on. You have a roof over your head and food on the table. I'm about to lose everything." The twisted logic was breathtaking. In Jake's mind, Lisa's disability benefits were somehow less legitimate than his own financial needs because she had family support. He had convinced himself that taking her money wasn't theft, but rather a redistribution of resources within the family, a redistribution that he had decided on unilaterally without consulting anyone. "When are you going to pay me back?" Lisa asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. Jake shrugged, avoiding her eyes. "I don't know. When I can. Look, Lisa, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe it's time for you to start thinking about getting a real job instead of relying on government handouts. There are plenty of people with disabilities who work full-time." The suggestion that her disability benefits were somehow shameful
or that she was lazy for receiving them, cut deeper than anything else he had said. Lisa had spent months agonizing over the decision to apply for SSDI, worried about exactly these kinds of judgments. She had internalized so much guilt about not being able to work full-time that she often pushed herself beyond her limits, trying to prove to herself and others that she was still valuable and productive despite her limitations. "I do work," Lisa said quietly. "I'm in school. I'm building skills so that I can eventually work in a way that accommodates my condition. And even if I wasn't, that wouldn't give you the right to steal from me. Stop calling it stealing. It's family money. We're all in this together, right? That's what Dad always says. Family comes first. Well, maybe it's time for you to put the family first instead of just thinking about yourself." The manipulation was stunning in its audacity. Jake had taken Lisa's money without permission, lied about it when confronted, and was now attempting to reframe his theft as Lisa being selfish for wanting her money back. He was using their father's words about family loyalty as a weapon to justify his actions and make Lisa feel guilty for standing up for herself. "If we're family, then why didn't you ask me for help? If you were struggling so much, why didn't you come to me and explain your situation? Maybe we could have worked something out."
Jake's laugh was harsh. "Right, like you would have just handed over hundreds of dollars to help me out? Come on, Lisa. You count every penny. You budget everything down to the last dollar. You would have lectured me about financial responsibility and suggested I get a second job or ask Mom and Dad for help instead." He wasn't entirely wrong, Lisa realized with a start. She was careful with money, perhaps overly so. Her fear of financial instability, rooted in years of watching her parents struggle with her medical expenses, had made her cautious about lending money, even to family. But that caution didn't justify theft, and Jake's assumption that she would have refused to help was just that, an assumption. "You don't know what I would have said because you never asked," Lisa pointed out. "You just decided to take what you wanted and lie about it." Their conversation was interrupted by Patricia calling from the kitchen. "Jake, mijo, are you staying for dinner? I made enough enchiladas for everyone." Jake glanced toward the kitchen, then back at Lisa. When he spoke again, his voice carried a clear threat. "Lisa, I think you need to be very careful about what you do next. If you tell Mom and Dad about this, it's going to tear this family apart. Is that really what you want? Mom's been so happy lately, talking about how well you're doing in school and how proud she is of your progress. Dad's been working extra hours to help support you. Do you really want to destroy their peace of mind over money that you don't even really need?" The emotional manipulation was expertly crafted. Jake was positioning himself as the protector of their parents' happiness, while casting Lisa as the potential destroyer of family harmony. He was exploiting her love for their parents and her guilt about being financially dependent on them to pressure her into silence. And Sarah? She doesn't know about this, and she doesn't need to. She's already questioning our relationship because of money problems. If this comes out, if there's some big family drama, it's going to be the last straw for her. Do you want to be responsible for breaking us up? Now, Jake was expanding the circle of people who would supposedly be hurt if Lisa sought justice for his actions. In his narrative, pursuing accountability for theft would make Lisa responsible for their parents' distress, their family's dysfunction, and even his romantic relationship's failure. "Jake's coming," Patricia called again, her voice cheerful and warm. Jake straightened his shoulders and fixed Lisa with a steady stare. "This conversation never happened," he said quietly. "You're gonna go in there, eat dinner with the family, and forget about this whole thing. Because you're smart enough to know that some things are more important than money, and family is one of them." He walked toward the kitchen, leaving Lisa standing alone in the living room, feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. In the span of 15 minutes, her understanding of her brother and her place in the family had been fundamentally altered. Jake wasn't the protective older sibling she had always believed him to be. He was someone who could steal from her without remorse, lie to her without hesitation, and manipulate her emotions to avoid accountability for his actions. As the sound of cheerful conversation drifted from the kitchen, Lisa realized that Jake had left her with an impossible choice. She could expose his theft and risk destroying her family's unity, or she could remain silent and accept that she was powerless to protect herself even within her own home. For the moment, the weight of family loyalty and the fear of causing pain to people she loved felt heavier than her need for justice. But deep down, Lisa knew that staying silent wouldn't make the problem disappear. It would only teach Jake that he could continue to take advantage of her vulnerability without consequences.
The breaking point came 3 weeks later, on a cold December morning, when Lisa woke up to find her prescription bottle empty and no money to refill it. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding the orange plastic container that had contained her migraine medication, and felt the familiar panic that accompanied the prospect of going without her treatment. The neurologist had been clear. Missing doses could trigger severe episodes that might last for days. Lisa had experienced this before, during the early days when she was still adjusting to her medication regimen, and the memory of lying in a darkened room for 72 hours, unable to eat or drink without vomiting, still haunted her. She checked her bank balance on her phone for the third time that morning, hoping that somehow the numbers had magically changed. $47.16. Her next disability payment wouldn't arrive for another week, and the medication cost $93 even with her insurance coverage. Lisa made her way to the kitchen, where Patricia was preparing breakfast before leaving for her job at the elementary school. The sight of her mother humming softly while scrambling eggs brought tears to Lisa's eyes. Patricia had been doing this dance for months now, working extra shifts at the school, taking on additional responsibilities, all to help support Lisa during her financial crisis. "Mom," Lisa said quietly, "I need to ask you for another favor." Patricia turned, immediately picking up on the distress in her daughter's voice. "What is it, Mingha? What do you need?" The shame burned in Lisa's chest as she explained about the medication. She watched her mother's face carefully, seeing the flash of worry followed by the quick mental calculation that Lisa knew Patricia was doing, figuring out how to stretch an already tight budget to accommodate another unexpected expense. "Of course, baby," Patricia said without hesitation. "I'll stop by the pharmacy on my way home from work. Don't worry about it." But Lisa could see the worry lines deepening around her mother's eyes. She knew that Patricia would probably skip lunch that day to save money, or perhaps put off getting her own prescription refilled until the next payday. The ripple effects of Jake's theft continued to spread through their family like poison, affecting everyone except the person who had caused the problem. After Patricia left for work, Lisa found herself alone in the house with her thoughts and a growing sense of rage that surprised her with its intensity. For weeks, she had been focused on the practical consequences of Jake's actions, the financial hardship, the loss of independence, the strain on her parents. But now, sitting in the morning silence of her childhood home, she began to understand the deeper violation that had occurred. Jake hadn't just stolen money from her, he had stolen her sense of safety within her own family. He had taken advantage of her disability, using her condition as justification for his belief that she didn't deserve financial autonomy. Most painfully, he had weaponized the family loyalty that had been the foundation of Lisa's identity since childhood, turning it into a tool to keep her silent about his abuse. The phone rang, startling Lisa from her thoughts. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but when she answered, the voice was familiar.
"Lisa? This is Detective Maria Gonzalez with the Phoenix Police Department. I'm calling about the fraud report you filed with your bank regarding unauthorized withdrawals from your account." Lisa's heart began to race.
She had almost forgotten about the bank's investigation, assuming it would disappear into bureaucratic limbo, like so many other official processes she had encountered. The idea that law enforcement was actually following up felt both thrilling and terrifying. The bank has completed their internal investigation and determined that the withdrawals were indeed unauthorized, Detective Gonzalez continued. They've provided us with security footage from the ATM locations where the withdrawals occurred. We'd like you to come in and review the footage to see if you can identify the individual who used your card. Lisa felt a strange disconnect, as though she were watching this conversation happen to someone else. Part of her wanted to hang up the phone and pretend the call had never happened. But a stronger part, a part that had been growing steadily over the past few weeks, knew that this was her chance to stop being a victim and start fighting back. "When would you like me to come in?" she asked. "Would this afternoon work for you? Say around 2 o'clock? After hanging up, Lisa sat in the living room staring at the family photos that lined the mantel. There was Jake at his high school graduation, his arm around Lisa's shoulders as she beamed up at him with obvious adoration. There was the whole family at Emma's wedding, everyone dressed up and smiling. There was a recent photo from Patricia's birthday dinner, all of them crowded around the table at their favorite Mexican restaurant. These images represented the family mythology that had sustained Lisa throughout her childhood, the belief that they were a tight-knit unit that would always protect and support each other. But the past few weeks had revealed cracks in that foundation that could no longer be ignored or repaired with silence. Lisa thought about her conversation with Marcus, her boyfriend from college, the previous evening. He had been increasingly concerned about her financial situation and her obvious distress, though she had been vague about the details. When she finally told him about her suspicions regarding Jake, his reaction had been immediate and uncompromising. "Lisa, you have to report this to the police. What your brother did isn't just wrong, it's illegal. And if you don't stop him now, he's going to keep doing it. Maybe to you, maybe to your parents, maybe to other vulnerable people." Marcus came from a different kind of family than Lisa did, one where individual accountability was valued over collective harmony, where calling out bad behavior was seen as protecting the family rather than betraying it. His perspective had been jarring but illuminating, forcing Lisa to consider that maybe family loyalty didn't require her to enable Jake's destructive choices. At 1:30 p.m., Lisa drove to the Phoenix Police Department, her hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. The building was intimidating, all concrete and glass, with officers in uniform moving purposefully through the corridors. Lisa had never been inside a police station before, and the atmosphere felt foreign and somehow final, as though crossing the threshold would irrevocably change her life. Detective Gonzalez was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that immediately put Lisa at ease. She led Lisa to a small office and offered her coffee before settling behind her desk. With a thick file, "I want you to know that bank fraud cases like this can be complex. The fact that your actual debit card was used along with the correct PIN suggests that whoever did this had intimate access to your personal information. In cases like this, we often find that the perpetrator is someone close to the victim, a family member, romantic partner, or close friend." Lisa nodded, her throat too tight to speak. "I'm going to show you some security footage now. I want you to take your time and tell me if you recognize the person making these withdrawals."
The first video was grainy black and white footage from an ATM outside a convenience store. Lisa watched as a figure approached the machine, inserted a card, and began the withdrawal process. Even with the poor video quality, the person's identity was unmistakable. It was Jake, wearing the same Arizona Cardinals baseball cap he had owned since high school, the same one their father had given him for his 16th birthday. "Do you recognize this individual?" Detective Gonzalez asked gently. Lisa stared at the screen, watching her brother systematically steal money that she needed for her basic survival. In that moment, all of Jake's justifications and manipulations fell away, leaving only the stark reality of his actions. He had looked directly into the security camera while using her stolen card, apparently unconcerned about being caught or identified. "Yes," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's my brother, Jake Martinez." Detective Gonzalez nodded and made a note in her file. "I know this must be very difficult for you. Family situations like this are never easy. Can you tell me how your brother might have gained access to your debit card and PIN number?" As Lisa explained Jake's frequent presence at their family home and his knowledge of their father's birthday, she felt something shift inside her. Each detail she shared felt like a small act of rebellion against the silence Jake had demanded of her. For the first time in weeks, she was telling the truth about what had happened to her, and it felt like oxygen after nearly drowning. "What happens next?" Lisa asked after she had finished her statement. "We'll issue a warrant for your brother's arrest on charges of identity theft and fraud. These are felony charges in Arizona, particularly given the amount of money involved. Your brother could face significant jail time if convicted." The word jail hit Lisa like a physical blow. Despite everything Jake had done, the idea of him being arrested felt surreal and frightening. She thought about Patricia getting a phone call from the police, about Robert having to take time off work to deal with legal proceedings, about the whispered conversations and family shame that would follow. "I need you to understand something," Detective Gonzalez said, seeming to sense Lisa's internal struggle. "What your brother did to you, taking advantage of your disability, stealing money you need for medical care, manipulating you to stay quiet, this is a form of elder and disabled person abuse. Even though you're young, you're still in a protected class due to your disability status. The courts take these crimes very seriously." Lisa had never thought of herself as belonging to a protected class or as a victim of abuse. The words felt strange and formal, but they also carried a validation that she hadn't realized she needed. Someone in authority was telling her that what had happened to her mattered, that her disability didn't make her less deserving of protection under the law. "You don't have to decide anything right now, but I want you to think about something. Your brother stole from you once, and when you confronted him, he showed no remorse and made no effort to return the money. People who commit these kinds of crimes against family members rarely stop on their own. If anything, they usually escalate." As Lisa drove home from the police station, she felt as though she was seeing her neighborhood for the first time. The familiar streets and landmarks looked different somehow. Less safe, less permanent. She understood that she was approaching a point of no return. Once Jake was arrested, there would be no taking back her decision, no returning to the family dynamics that had existed before. But she also understood something else. Those old family dynamics had been built on a foundation of denial and enabling that had ultimately made Jake's abuse possible. Her silence hadn't protected the family. It had protected Jake while leaving her vulnerable to continued exploitation. That evening, as Lisa sat in her bedroom looking out at the desert sunset, she made a decision that would change everything. She picked up her phone and called Detective Gonzalez. "I want to move forward with pressing charges. My brother needs to face consequences for what he did, and I need to know that I'm safe in my own home." The decision felt both terrifying and liberating, like stepping off a cliff while simultaneously growing wings.
The arrest happened on a Thursday morning while Jake was at work. Lisa only learned about it when Patricia called her, sobbing, from the elementary school where she worked. "Mijita, something terrible has happened." Patricia's voice was barely comprehensible through her tears. "The police came to Jake's work and arrested him. They're saying he stole money from someone's bank account. It has to be a mistake. Our Jake would never do something like that." Lisa felt her stomach drop as she listened to her mother's anguish. Despite having made the decision to press charges, she hadn't fully prepared herself for the reality of how it would affect her family. Hearing Patricia's raw pain made her question everything, even though she knew she had done the right thing. "Mom, where are you now?" Lisa asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm at school, but I need to leave. I need to go to the jail and find out what's happening. Can you meet me there? And call your father. He's at work and doesn't know yet."
The next few hours were a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and sitting in uncomfortable plastic chairs at the Maricopa County Jail. Robert arrived still wearing his work coveralls, his face ashen and confused. Patricia had composed herself somewhat, but Lisa could see the tremor in her hands as she filled out visitor forms. "I don't understand," Robert kept repeating. "Jake's had his problems, but he's not a thief. There has to be some explanation." Lisa sat silently beside her parents, knowing that she held the explanation they were desperate for, but unable to find the words to tell them. Detective Gonzalez had warned her that this moment would be difficult, but nothing could have prepared her for the guilt of watching her parents' world crumble while knowing she was the cause. When they were finally allowed to see Jake, he looked smaller somehow in his orange jumpsuit. His usually confident demeanor had been replaced by something Lisa had never seen before: genuine fear. He hugged their parents desperately, and Lisa could see him struggling not to cry. "This is all a big misunderstanding," he told them through the reinforced glass of the visitor's room. "Someone must have stolen my identity or something. I would never steal from anyone." Lisa watched her brother lie directly to her parents' faces with an ease that was both impressive and horrifying. Even now, faced with arrest and criminal charges, he was maintaining his innocence and counting on their unconditional belief in him. "We're going to get you a lawyer," Patricia said firmly. "The best one we can afford. This will all get sorted out." After they left the jail, Lisa's parents began making frantic phone calls to attorneys, borrowing money from Robert's brother, and canceling their planned Christmas vacation to redirect those funds toward Jake's legal defense. Lisa watched them mobilize their resources to protect Jake, the same way they had always mobilized to protect her during her medical crises, and the parallel made her feel sick. That evening, Detective Gonzalez called Lisa to update her on the case. "Your brother posted bail this afternoon," she informed Lisa. "His parents put up their house as collateral." The news hit Lisa like a physical blow. Her parents had risked their home, the place where she lived, the foundation of their family's stability, to secure Jake's freedom. The sacrifice felt enormous and misguided, but Lisa understood the love that had motivated it. "There's something else you should know," Detective Gonzalez continued. "Your brother's attorney contacted our office today. He's going to argue that this was a family financial arrangement rather than theft, that you had given your brother permission to use your card, and that this is essentially a civil matter between siblings." Lisa felt her chest tighten. Jake was going to claim that she had allowed him to take the money, turning her own family against her and making her the liar in the situation. It was a brilliant strategy that exploited the complexity of family relationships and the difficulty of proving intent in intimate crimes. "Can he do that?" Lisa asked. "He can try," Detective Gonzalez said. "That's why it's going to be important for you to document everything you remember about your interactions with Jake regarding this money. Any text messages, emails, or witnesses to conversations will be helpful." Over the next few days, Lisa found herself living in a strange, suspended reality. Jake was back home, staying in his old bedroom while his case was pending, which meant that Lisa was now sharing space with the person who had violated her trust and was actively working to portray her as a liar in court.
The family dynamics were unbearable. Robert and Patricia treated Jake with careful tenderness, as though he were the victim in the situation. They spoke in hushed tones about legal strategies and character witnesses, while Lisa felt increasingly invisible and isolated within her own home. Jake, for his part, played the role of the wrongly accused son perfectly. He was quiet and subdued, helping with household chores without being asked, and making frequent references to how much the arrest had taught him about taking life seriously. He never directly mentioned Lisa or the charges against him, but his presence felt like a constant, implicit accusation. The breaking point came during a family dinner when Patricia mentioned that she had been talking to their priest about the situation. Father Rodriguez says that families need to stick together during trials like this, Patricia said, passing the bowl of rice around the table. He reminded me that forgiveness is one of our most important values, and that sometimes good people make mistakes that look worse than they really are. Lisa realized that her parents were not just defending Jake, they were actively rewriting the narrative to make his actions acceptable. In their minds, whatever Jake had done was forgivable because he was family, and maintaining family unity was more important than accountability or justice. Mom, Lisa said carefully, what if Jake really did steal money from someone? Would that change how you feel? Patricia's face immediately showed her distress at the question. Mija, we can't think like that. We have to have faith in our family. Jake is not a thief. I know my son. Robert nodded agreement. Lisa, I know this situation is confusing, but we need to trust each other. Family is all we really have in this world. Lisa excused herself from dinner and went to her room, where she called the one person she knew would understand her perspective. Marcus, I don't know if I can keep doing this, she said when her boyfriend answered. My whole family is acting like Jake is the victim here, and I'm starting to feel crazy. Lisa, you're not crazy, Marcus said firmly. What you're experiencing is called gaslighting, and it's really common in families where abuse has occurred. The family system tries to protect itself by minimizing the abuse and blaming the victim for disrupting the peace. Marcus had been researching family financial abuse since Lisa first told him about her situation, and his insights had become a lifeline for her sanity. He helped her understand that her family's reaction was predictable and that it didn't mean she was wrong to seek justice. I think I need to move out, Lisa said. I can't live here anymore, watching them defend him while treating me like I'm the problem. Where would you go? Marcus asked practically. You're still waiting for your disability payments to get back on track. It was a good question. Lisa's financial situation remained precarious, and her options for independent living were limited. But staying in a home where her abuser was being protected while she was subtly blamed felt impossible. The solution came from an unexpected source. The next day, Lisa received a call from a social worker named Amanda Chen from the Maricopa County Adult Protective Services. I understand you're involved in a financial abuse case involving a family member, Amanda said. I wanted to reach out because we have resources available for people in your situation. Amanda explained that there were transitional housing programs specifically designed for adults with disabilities who were experiencing family abuse. The program could provide Lisa with temporary housing, assistance with benefits advocacy, and counseling services while her case was pending. The goal is to help you maintain your independence while staying safe, Amanda explained. A lot of people don't realize that family financial abuse is one of the most underreported crimes in Arizona. You're not alone in this situation. For the first time since Jake's arrest, Lisa felt like someone was offering her a path forward, rather than asking her to sacrifice her well-being for the sake of family harmony. The housing program would allow her to remove herself from the toxic dynamics at home while building skills and resources for long-term independence. Lisa spent that evening researching the program online and reading testimonials from other people who had used their services. Many of the stories were remarkably similar to her own. Family members taking advantage of disability benefits, victims being pressured to stay quiet, and the difficulty of finding support when the abuse came from within the family itself. One testimonial particularly resonated with her. It was from a woman named Sarah, not Jake's girlfriend, but another Sarah, who had been financially abused by her adult son for several years before finally seeking help. I thought I had to choose between my family and my safety, Sarah had written. But what I learned is that real family doesn't require you to accept abuse. Real family wants you to be safe and healthy and independent. When I finally stood up for myself, I didn't lose my family. I found out who my real family was. The words gave Lisa a framework for understanding her situation that felt both honest and hopeful. She wasn't destroying her family by seeking justice. She was refusing to enable the dysfunction that was destroying it from within. That night, Lisa made 2 phone calls that would reshape her future. The first was to Amanda Chen, accepting a spot in the transitional housing program. The second was to Detective Gonzalez, asking about additional resources for victims of family financial abuse. "I'm glad you called," Detective Gonzalez said. "I've been working with the prosecutor's office, and they want to meet with you next week to discuss your case. They're taking this very seriously, especially given the disability aspect. But I should warn you, your brother's attorney is going to try to discredit you in every way possible. They're going to claim you're mentally unstable, that your medications affect your judgment, that your family disputes aren't criminal matters." Lisa felt a familiar flutter of anxiety, but this time it was accompanied by something new: determination. Jake and his lawyer could attack her credibility all they wanted, but she had evidence on her side. She had bank records, security footage, and a growing network of professionals who understood exactly what kind of crime had been committed against her. "I'm ready," Lisa told Detective Gonzalez. "I want to see this through to the end." As she hung up the phone, Lisa realized that for the first time in months, she felt like she was moving forward rather than just surviving. She was no longer the passive victim of Jake's choices. She was actively building a case for justice and creating a life that didn't depend on the approval or protection of people who had failed to protect her. The small wins were accumulating. She had supportive professionals in her corner, she had housing options that would give her independence, and she had a boyfriend who understood that family loyalty shouldn't require accepting abuse. Most importantly, she had found her own voice and was using it to advocate for herself in ways she had never thought possible. Tomorrow, she would start the process of moving into the transitional housing program. It would be the first time she had ever lived independently. And while that prospect was frightening, it also felt like the beginning of the life she was supposed to be living, a life where her disability didn't make her a target for exploitation, and where standing up for herself was seen as strength rather than betrayal.
Moving into the transitional housing facility should have felt like freedom, but instead, Lisa found herself facing challenges she hadn't anticipated. The Sunshine Manor Independent Living Program was located in a converted apartment complex in central Phoenix, and while her small one-bedroom unit was clean and functional, the adjustment to complete independence proved overwhelming in ways that had nothing to do with her disability. For the first time in her life, Lisa was responsible for everything: grocery shopping, meal planning, scheduling her own medical appointments, managing her medications without reminders, and navigating public transportation to get to court proceedings and meetings with her legal team. The simple task of figuring out how to get to the prosecutor's office on time while dealing with a migraine episode became a logistical nightmare that left her feeling incompetent and isolated. The financial aspect was equally challenging. The transitional housing program covered her rent for 6 months, but Lisa still needed money for food, transportation, and incidental expenses. Her disability payments were supposed to resume their normal schedule, but bureaucratic delays meant she was living on the emergency assistance fund provided by Adult Protective Services, barely enough to cover basic necessities. Worse, Lisa discovered that living with other abuse survivors while providing some community also exposed her to stories and trauma that triggered her own anxiety in unexpected ways. Her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was an elderly woman whose son had stolen her entire life savings before abandoning her to the housing program. Hearing details about financial exploitation that made her own situation seem relatively minor left Lisa feeling guilty about her complaints, while simultaneously terrified about how much worse things could have been. The first major legal setback came during Lisa's initial meeting with Assistant District Attorney Catherine Walsh. Lisa had expected the prosecutor to be sympathetic and supportive, but instead found herself facing a barrage of difficult questions that felt more like an interrogation than a consultation. "I need you to understand something, Ms. Martinez," ADA Walsh said, reviewing the case file across her desk. "Your brother's attorney is claiming this was a consensual family financial arrangement. They're saying you willingly gave him access to your account to help with family expenses, and that you're only calling it theft now because you've been influenced by outside parties who don't understand your family dynamics.
Lisa felt her chest tighten. That's not true. I never gave him permission to take my money. I didn't even know he had my PIN until I figured it out after the theft. But you admit that you used your father's birthday as your PIN? And that your brother would have known that date? ADA Walsh pressed. Yes, but that doesn't mean I wanted him to use it. And you live in the same house as your brother, where he would have had multiple opportunities to observe you entering your PIN? Each question felt like a small attack on Lisa's credibility. She began to understand why ADA Walsh was being so aggressive. These were exactly the kinds of questions Jake's defense attorney would ask in court, and if Lisa couldn't handle them in a friendly environment, she would be destroyed on the witness stand. Ms. Martinez, I'm also concerned about the delay between the theft and your report to police. You waited several weeks after discovering the unauthorized withdrawals before filing a complaint. Your brother's attorney is going to argue that this delay proves you weren't really upset about the money being taken. Lisa tried to explain about Jake's manipulation, about his threats regarding family harmony, about her own internal struggle with family loyalty. But as she spoke, she could see skepticism in ADA Walsh's eyes. The prosecutor was clearly wondering whether Lisa was a reliable witness or a confused young woman who had been manipulated by advocacy groups into turning a family dispute into a criminal matter. There's something else, ADA Walsh said, consulting her notes. Your brother's attorney has filed a motion claiming that your disability affects your cognitive function and memory. They're arguing that you may not accurately remember giving him permission to use your card, particularly if you were experiencing medication side effects or migraine episodes at the time. The attack on her mental competency felt like a punch to the gut. Lisa had spent years fighting to be taken seriously despite her disability, working to prove that her condition didn't affect her intelligence or judgment. Now, Jake's lawyer was using her own medical history as a weapon against her, suggesting that her disability made her an unreliable witness to her own exploitation.
The situation at home became even more hostile after Lisa moved out. Robert and Patricia took her departure as confirmation that she had been poisoned against the family by outside influences. Patricia called Lisa daily, sometimes multiple times, begging her to come home and work this out as a family. Mija, I don't understand what these people have told you, but this isn't you, Patricia would say, her voice breaking with emotion. You've never been vindictive or cruel. Please come home so we can talk about this properly. The calls were emotional torture for Lisa, who desperately wanted her mother's support, but couldn't return to an environment where her abuser was being protected and she was being blamed for disrupting family peace. Each conversation left her questioning her own judgment and wondering if she was indeed being unreasonable or selfish. The pressure intensified when Emma flew in from Colorado for an emergency family meeting. Lisa agreed to meet her sister at a neutral location, a coffee shop near the community college, hoping that Emma might provide a more objective perspective on the situation. Instead, Emma arrived with a prepared speech that felt like an intervention. Lisa, I've been talking to Mom and Dad, and I'm really worried about you. This whole thing with Jake is tearing our family apart. I know you think he took your money, but maybe there's an explanation we haven't considered. Emma had always been the family peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts and found compromise solutions. But her approach to this situation felt like a betrayal to Lisa, who realized that even her sister was more invested in maintaining family unity than protecting her from abuse. Jake admitted to me that he took the money, Lisa said, quietly. He just doesn't think it was stealing because he believes I don't really need it. Emma's face showed surprise at this information, but she quickly recovered. Okay, so maybe he borrowed money without asking. That's not great, but it's not necessarily a crime. Maybe we can work out a payment plan or something. Emma, he stole almost $800 from me, money I need for medications and basic living expenses. And when I confronted him, he threatened me and tried to make me feel guilty for wanting it back. I just think you need to consider the consequences of what you're doing. If Jake goes to prison, it's going to destroy Mom and Dad. They're already talking about having to sell the house to pay for his legal fees. Is that really what you want? The manipulation was sophisticated and effective. Emma was positioning Lisa as the person responsible for the family's destruction, rather than Jake being responsible for his own criminal actions. She was asking Lisa to sacrifice her own justice and safety to protect her parents from the consequences of Jake's choices. The meeting ended with Emma in tears and Lisa feeling more isolated than ever. Her sister's visit had been intended to bring her back into the family fold, but instead it had made clear that Lisa could only be welcomed back if she was willing to pretend that Jake hadn't abused her. The most devastating blow came when Lisa received a call from Detective Gonzalez with news about the case. "I need to let you know that your brother's attorney has found a witness who claims you told her that you had given Jake permission to use your money," Detective Gonzalez said carefully. Lisa felt the room spin around her. "What? Who?"
A woman named Sarah Fletcher, apparently your brother's girlfriend. She's signed an affidavit stating that you told her at a family gathering that you were helping Jake with his financial problems by letting him access your disability benefits. The lie was so outrageous that Lisa initially couldn't even process it. She had met Sarah only a handful of times, always briefly, and had never discussed her financial situation with her. But she realized that Jake had coached Sarah to provide false testimony that would support his defense strategy. "Detective, that's completely false. I barely know Sarah, and I certainly never told her anything like that." "I believe you," Detective Gonzalez said, "but this complicates things significantly. It's going to be your word against hers, and Jake's attorney is going to argue that Sarah has no reason to lie while you have a motivation to change your story after the fact." Lisa hung up the phone feeling utterly defeated. Not only was Jake using her disability against her, but he was now manufacturing false evidence and manipulating his girlfriend into committing perjury. The legal system that was supposed to protect her felt increasingly stacked against her, and she began to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake by pursuing criminal charges. That evening, Lisa experienced the worst migraine episode she had had in months. The stress of the legal proceedings, combined with her isolation from family and the constant attacks on her credibility, had triggered a neurological crisis that left her bedridden for 3 days. She was unable to keep food down, couldn't tolerate light or sound, and found herself wondering if the effort to seek justice was literally making her sicker. During those dark days in her small apartment, Lisa questioned everything about her decision to press charges. Maybe Emma was right that she should have handled this as a family matter. Maybe ADA Walsh was right to be skeptical about her case. Maybe Jake's lawyer was right that her disability affected her judgment and memory. The doubt was consuming and dangerous, threatening to undermine everything Lisa had worked to build over the past months. She began to understand why so many victims of family financial abuse never came forward. The system seemed designed to protect perpetrators who could manipulate family loyalty and exploit their victims' vulnerabilities. On the 3rd day of her migraine, as Lisa lay in the darkness of her bedroom, she received an unexpected text message from Marcus. "I know you're going through hell right now, but I want you to remember something. The truth doesn't change just because other people lie about it. Jake stole from you. That's a fact, regardless of what anyone else says or does. You deserve justice, and you deserve a family that protects you instead of protecting your abuser." The message was exactly what Lisa needed to hear. Despite all the pressure and manipulation she was facing, the fundamental facts of her case remained unchanged. Jake had stolen from her, had shown no remorse, and was now orchestrating a campaign of lies to avoid accountability. Her decision to seek justice hadn't been wrong. It had just been harder than she had expected. But for the first time since this ordeal began, Lisa was starting to understand that seeking justice wasn't just about recovering her stolen money or seeing Jake punished. It was about establishing a fundamental principle: that her disability didn't make her an acceptable target for exploitation, and that family loyalty couldn't be used as a shield for criminal behavior. The obstacles she was facing were enormous, but they were also clarifying. Lisa was beginning to understand that this fight was bigger than just her relationship with Jake. It was about whether society would protect vulnerable people from family abuse or continue to enable it in the name of family privacy and unity. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source on a rainy Tuesday morning in February. Lisa was sitting in the waiting room of the prosecutor's office, preparing for what she expected to be another discouraging meeting about the weaknesses in her case, when ADA Walsh emerged from her office with an expression Lisa had never seen before: genuine excitement. "Ms. Martinez, I need you to come in right away," Walsh said, practically pulling Lisa into her office. "We've had a major development in your case." Lisa's heart began racing, though she wasn't sure if it was from hope or fear. Over the past weeks, every development had seemed to favor Jake's defense, and she had learned to brace herself for bad news. "What happened?" Lisa asked, settling into the familiar chair across from Walsh's desk. "Your brother made a mistake," Walsh said, spreading several documents across her desk. "A big one. He tried to use your debit card again." Lisa stared at the papers in disbelief. "What do you mean? My card was canceled months ago." "Not your original card," Walsh explained. "Apparently, when the bank issued you a new card after the fraud report, they sent it to your parents' house. Your brother intercepted it, activated it, and attempted to use it at a gas station last week." The audacity was breathtaking. Even while facing criminal charges for stealing from Lisa's account, Jake had continued his theft by stealing her replacement debit card. It was as though he couldn't help himself, or perhaps he had become so convinced of his own entitlement to Lisa's money that he saw nothing wrong with taking more. "The gas station has excellent security cameras, and this time we have crystal clear footage of your brother using your card. Better yet, he used it at 2:47 a.m. when you have documented proof that you were at the emergency room being treated for a migraine episode." Lisa remembered that night vividly. The migraine had been so severe that Marcus had driven her to the hospital, where they had administered IV medication and kept her under observation until morning. She had a stack of medical records with timestamps that would make it impossible for Jake's lawyer to claim she had given him permission to use her card. "There's more," Walsh said, her voice growing more animated. "When the card was declined, because we had already flagged the account for monitoring, your brother became agitated with the clerk. The security footage shows him clearly stating, and I quote, 'This is my sister's card, but she owes me this money anyway.' The confession was captured in high-definition video with clear audio. Jake had essentially admitted to theft while also revealing his sense of entitlement to Lisa's disability benefits. It was exactly the kind of evidence that would demolish his defense strategy of claiming Lisa had given him permission to use her card. "But the best part," Walsh continued, "is what happened next. When the clerk told him the card was being reported as stolen, your brother said, 'My sister is disabled and confused about money. She doesn't understand that I'm just helping manage her finances.'" Lisa felt a surge of anger so intense it momentarily overwhelmed her relief about the evidence. Jake's statement revealed everything about how he viewed her, not as an autonomous adult capable of managing her own finances, but as someone whose disability made her incompetent and in need of his management. It was exactly the kind of paternalistic abuse that advocates had warned her about. "Ms. Martinez, this changes everything about your case. Your brother has essentially confessed to theft while also demonstrating the exact type of disability-based financial abuse that the courts take very seriously. His own words prove that he stole from you because he believed your disability made you incapable of managing your own money." For the first time in months, Lisa felt like the legal system was working in her favor rather than against her. Jake's arrogance and sense of entitlement had finally betrayed him in a way that his lawyer wouldn't be able to explain away or minimize. "What happens now?" Lisa asked. "We're filing additional charges for the second theft, and we're also adding charges related to disability abuse. Your brother's lawyer has been trying to portray this as a family dispute, but his client's own statements prove this is a clear case of financial exploitation of a disabled person."
The additional evidence had an immediate impact on the family dynamics as well.
When Robert and Patricia learned about Jake's second theft attempt, their unwavering support for him finally began to crack. Patricia called Lisa that evening, and for the first time since the ordeal began, her mother's voice carried doubt rather than defensive certainty. "Mija, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth," Patricia said quietly. "Did Jake really take money from you without your permission?" The question felt like a lifeline. After months of being treated as a liar and a family destroyer, Lisa finally had the opportunity to tell her mother the truth without having to prove every detail. "Yes, Mom. He took almost $800 from my account, and when I confronted him about it, he told me I didn't really need the money because I had you and Dad to take care of me. Then he tried to make me feel guilty for wanting it back." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "And he tried to take more money last week?" "Yes. Even while he's facing charges for the first theft, he stole my new debit card and tried to use it. Mom, he told the gas station clerk that I was too disabled and confused to manage my own money." Lisa heard her mother take a shaky breath. "Mija, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you from the beginning. I should have protected you instead of protecting him." The apology felt like a dam bursting. For the first time since Jake's arrest, Lisa felt like she had her mother back. Not the defensive woman who had been protecting Jake at all costs, but the fierce advocate who had fought for Lisa throughout her childhood and medical journey. "Mom, I never wanted to hurt the family," Lisa said, tears flowing freely. "I just wanted Jake to stop taking advantage of me." "You didn't hurt the family, baby," Patricia said firmly. "Jake hurt the family when he decided to steal from his disabled sister. I've been so focused on protecting him that I forgot my job is to protect all my children, especially the ones who are most vulnerable." The conversation with Patricia opened the floodgates for a broader reckoning within the Martinez family. Robert, who had been quietly struggling with his own doubts about Jake's innocence, finally admitted that he had seen warning signs that he had chosen to ignore. "I knew Jake was having money problems, and I knew he resented your disability benefits. I heard him make comments about how you were lucky to get money without working. I should have realized that kind of thinking was dangerous." Emma called from Colorado to offer her own apology. "Lisa, I was wrong to ask you to drop the charges. I was so focused on keeping the family together that I didn't think about whether the family was worth keeping together if it meant protecting someone who was abusing you."
The family's acknowledgement of the truth felt validating in ways that Lisa hadn't expected. She had been so focused on proving Jake's guilt that she hadn't realized how much she needed her family to simply believe her. Their support didn't erase the months of isolation and doubt she had endured, but it gave her strength for the legal battle ahead. The breakthrough also attracted attention from unexpected quarters. Amanda Chen from Adult Protective Services called to tell Lisa that her case was being highlighted as an example of successful prosecution of family financial abuse. "Your willingness to come forward is making a difference for other people in similar situations," Amanda explained. "We've had 3 other cases this month where victims cited your example as giving them courage to report abuse by family members." The idea that her suffering might help other people gave Lisa's struggle a meaning that extended beyond her personal quest for justice. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting to establish precedent that would protect other vulnerable people from exploitation by family members who believed disability made someone fair game for abuse. Detective Gonzalez also shared news that would prove crucial to Lisa's case. "We've been investigating your brother's financial records as part of the criminal case," she explained during a phone call. "We've found evidence that he's been systematically stealing from other family members as well." The investigation had revealed that Jake had been forging checks from his grandmother's account, stealing cash from his parents' emergency fund, and even taking money from Eva's purse during family visits.
The pattern of theft within the family painted a picture of someone who viewed his relatives' money as his own personal resource to tap whenever he faced financial pressure. This establishes a clear pattern of family financial abuse, Detective Gonzalez explained. It's not going to be an isolated incident or a misunderstanding. It's going to be evidence of deliberate, ongoing criminal behavior. The additional evidence transformed Lisa's case from a difficult he-said, she-said situation into a clear-cut example of criminal exploitation. Jake's lawyer would no longer be able to argue that this was a consensual family arrangement or a misunderstanding between siblings. But perhaps the most important breakthrough was internal. As Lisa processed the validation from her family, the strength of the evidence, and the broader impact of her case, she felt something shift inside her that had nothing to do with legal strategies or family dynamics. For the first time since her diagnosis years earlier, Lisa felt truly powerful, not despite her disability, but in spite of those who had tried to use her disability against her. She had refused to be silenced, had built a case for justice despite enormous pressure to stay quiet, and had established herself as someone whose rights mattered, regardless of what other people thought about her capacity or competence. The girl who had once been afraid to upset family harmony by demanding justice had been transformed into an advocate who understood that real family loyalty meant protecting the vulnerable, not enabling their abusers. As Lisa prepared for the final phase of Jake's prosecution, she knew that regardless of the ultimate outcome in court, she had already won the most important victory. She had reclaimed her own power and voice in a system that had tried to silence her because of her disability. The girl who had once been afraid to upset family harmony by demanding justice had become a woman who understood that some things, like dignity, safety, and basic human rights, were worth fighting for, even when the fight was hard and the opponents were people she loved. The courtroom was smaller than Lisa had expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that cast everything in harsh relief. As she sat in the witness section, waiting for Jake's sentencing hearing to begin, Lisa reflected on how much had changed since that November morning when her debit card was first declined at the campus bookstore. The trial itself had been swift once Jake's lawyer realized the overwhelming evidence against him. Faced with multiple security videos, recorded confessions, and evidence of a pattern of family theft, Jake had ultimately accepted a plea agreement rather than risk a jury trial that would likely result in harsher penalties. He had pleaded guilty to 2 counts of identity theft, 1 count of fraud, and 1 count of financial abuse of a disabled person, charges that carried a combined sentence of 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. He would also be required to pay full restitution to Lisa and attend counseling for financial crimes and substance abuse, as the investigation had revealed that much of his theft had been motivated by gambling debts he had hidden from everyone, including Sarah. Judge Margaret Chen, no relation to Amanda from Adult Protective Services, had reviewed the case thoroughly before the sentencing hearing. Lisa had been impressed by the judge's understanding of disability issues and her clear anger about the exploitation that had occurred. "Mr. Martinez," Judge Chen said as Jake stood before the bench in his orange jumpsuit, "I have presided over many cases involving financial crimes, but few have disturbed me as much as this one. You didn't steal from a stranger or even an acquaintance. You systematically exploited your own sister, using her disability as justification for your belief that she didn't deserve financial autonomy." Lisa watched Jig's face as the judge spoke. He looked older than his 28 years, worn down by months of legal proceedings and the collapse of his relationship with Sarah, who had ultimately admitted to lying under oath and was facing her own legal consequences. For the first time since this ordeal began, Lisa saw something in her brother's expression that might have been genuine remorse. "Your sister trusted you," Judge Chen continued. "She looked up to you as her protector, and you betrayed that trust in the most fundamental way possible. You stole money she needed from medical care, and when she confronted you, you manipulated her into staying silent by exploiting her love for our family." The judge turned to Lisa, who had been asked to provide a victim impact statement. Lisa rose on slightly shaky legs, the speech she had prepared tucked in her hands. She had spent weeks working on these words with Amanda Chen and a victim's advocate, trying to capture not just the financial harm Jake had caused, but the deeper violation of trust and safety. "Your Honor," Lisa began, her voice stronger than she had expected, "when my brother stole from me, he didn't just take money. He took my sense of safety within my own family. He taught me that the people I loved most could see my disability as an opportunity to exploit me rather than a challenge they should help me overcome." Lisa paused, looking directly at Jake for the first time since the hearing began. "For years, Jake was the person I turned to when the world felt too difficult to navigate alone. When kids at school made fun of my differences, Jake defended me. When I was scared about my diagnosis, Jake researched my condition and came to doctor's appointments with me. That's why his betrayal hurt so much, because it came from someone I trusted completely." She continued, "The financial harm was significant. I had to ask my parents for money to buy basic necessities, and I had to delay medical care because I couldn't afford copays. But the emotional harm was worse. Jake made me feel like my disability made me less deserving of respect and autonomy. He made me question my own judgment and memory. Most painfully, he used my love for our family as a weapon to keep me silent about his abuse."
Lisa's voice grew stronger as she spoke about her recovery and growth. "But this experience also taught me something important about myself. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, and that my disability doesn't make me less capable of standing up for myself. I learned that real family means protecting each other, not enabling harmful behavior in the name of loyalty." She looked at Jake again, and this time she saw tears in his eyes. "I hope that during your time in prison, Jake learns that stealing from vulnerable people, especially family members, isn't just illegal, it's morally wrong. I hope he gets the help he needs to understand why he thought my disability made me fair game for exploitation." Lisa concluded, "I'm not asking for revenge, Your Honor. I'm asking for justice, and for Jake to face consequences that will help him become the person our family deserves, someone who protects rather than preys on the people who love him." When Lisa sat down, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even Jake's lawyer looked moved by her statement, and Lisa noticed Patricia wiping tears from her cheeks in the gallery behind her. Judge Chen sentenced Jake to the full 18 months, noting that his exploitation of a disabled family member represented a particularly serious breach of trust that warranted significant consequences. She also ordered him to participate in a restorative justice program that would require him to meet with other victims of family financial abuse to understand the broader impact of such crimes. After the hearing, Lisa was approached by several people she hadn't expected to see. The first was Dr. Sarah Williams, a researcher from Arizona State University who was studying family financial abuse involving disabled victims. "Ms. Martinez, I've been following your case through the court records," Dr. Williams explained. "Your situation highlights patterns we're seeing across the country. Family members who believe disability benefits somehow belong to the family rather than the individual recipient. Would you be interested in participating in a research study that could help other victims?" Lisa was intrigued by the opportunity to contribute to research that might help other people in similar situations. She had learned through her support groups that family financial abuse was far more common than she had realized, particularly targeting people with disabilities who were perceived as easy victims. The second unexpected visitor was Maria Santos, a legislative aide from the Arizona State Capitol. "Ms. Martinez, several legislators have heard about your case and are interested in strengthening the laws around family financial abuse.
Would you be willing to testify before a legislative committee about your experience? The idea of speaking publicly about her ordeal was daunting, but Lisa understood the potential impact. If her story could help create stronger protections for other vulnerable people, then the suffering she had endured would serve a larger purpose. As the courthouse emptied, Lisa found herself walking alongside her parents toward the parking lot. The relationship with Robert and Patricia had been slowly healing over the past months, but it was different now, more honest and less automatically protective of family dysfunction. "Mija," Patricia said quietly, "I know I can't undo the months when I didn't believe you, but I want you to know how proud I am of your strength. You stood up for yourself when no one else would, and you probably saved other people from going through what you experienced." Robert nodded agreement. "I've been thinking a lot about what Jake said, about you being lucky to get disability money. I realize now that we failed you by not correcting that kind of thinking earlier. Your disability benefits aren't luck or charity. They're compensation for barriers that other people don't face. We should have been clearer about that."
The acknowledgement meant everything to Lisa. For too long, she had internalized shame about receiving disability benefits, partly because of comments from Jake and others who saw them as unearned income, rather than necessary support for someone navigating the world with additional challenges. 6 months later, Lisa was thriving in ways she hadn't imagined possible during the darkest days of her legal battle. She had transitioned from the emergency housing program into her own apartment, where she was successfully managing independent living with support from disability services. Her relationship with Marcus had deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding about her needs and capabilities. Most significantly, Lisa had found her calling as an advocate for other victims of family financial abuse. She worked part-time with adult protective services, helping other people navigate the complex emotions and practical challenges of reporting abuse by family members. Her lived experience gave her a credibility with victims that professional advocates sometimes lacked. "The hardest part isn't the legal process," Lisa would tell the people she counseled. "It's accepting that protecting yourself isn't betraying your family. It's refusing to enable behavior that's destroying your family from within." Lisa also began speaking at professional conferences and training sessions for law enforcement, prosecutors, and social workers about recognizing and responding to family financial abuse involving disabled victims. Her presentations were always well received because she could explain both the emotional manipulation tactics used by perpetrators and the internal barriers that kept victims silent. The legislative testimony had been successful as well. Lisa's story had been instrumental in passing new laws that created enhanced penalties for financial crimes targeting disabled individuals and required better training for law enforcement and prosecutors handling such cases. Jake served his full sentence and was released with strict conditions that included ongoing counseling and supervised contact with Lisa. Their relationship would never return to what it had been, but during a carefully mediated meeting 6 months after his release, Jake offered Lisa a genuine apology that acknowledged the full scope of his wrongdoing. "Lisa, I know I can't undo what I did to you," he said, sitting across from her in the neutral meeting room. "I want you to know that I understand now that I didn't just steal money. I betrayed your trust and used your disability against you. That was wrong, and I'm sorry." The apology didn't erase the harm he had caused, but it gave Lisa closure and hope that Jake might eventually become the brother she had always believed him to be. As Lisa reflected on her journey from victim to survivor to advocate, she understood that her story had become larger than her individual experience. She had become a voice for other people whose disabilities made them targets for exploitation, and her refusal to stay silent had created ripple effects that extended far beyond her own case. The shy young woman who had once been afraid to challenge family dysfunction had become a powerful advocate who understood that real strength sometimes meant standing alone against people you love, knowing that justice and safety matter more than keeping peace. Lisa's story had begun with betrayal and theft, but it had evolved into something much more powerful, a testament to the strength that can emerge from trauma, and a reminder that disability doesn't make someone weak or incapable. It just makes them different in ways that deserve respect and protection rather than exploitation. In the end, Lisa had not only recovered her stolen money and seen her abuser face consequences, she had discovered her own voice and used it to make the world a little safer for other people like her.
That transformation, more than any legal victory, represented the true resolution of her journey from victim to advocate to hero.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.